Greetings, Ohio Valley. This is Dan Lima with OSU Extension from Belmont County.
And this is Karen Cox from WVU Extension in Ohio County. Thanks for tuning in to Extension Calling, your source for research-based information for the farm, garden, and home.
Good morning, Karen.
Good morning, Dan.
And it is the week of Groundhog's Day, and looking back on the tragedy that struck on February 2nd, the furry mammal saw his shadow.
Yeah, he did. A furry marmot. So we have 6 more weeks of winter, according to folklore, but we haven't really had much winter yet. And so I know a lot of people are happy that the ground's finally frozen. Although I was supposed to do a tree planting this weekend, and so yeah, that's not happening.
The ground's frozen, and then it's going to thaw in 2 days or so. Well, it's like we're getting these cold snaps for a couple days, and then it goes above freezing again, and it thaws. So, I mean, for frost seeding, this stuff is miraculous.
You know, that's a really good point. This is great timing for going out and doing some frost seeding.
Yeah, I've seen some good honeycombing effects on the ground where it just kind of it pops up and you step on it and it's crunchy, crunchy, crunchy. That's actually one of my favorite things. I don't know why. I find it so satisfying when the ground's frozen and it kind of pushes up and then you step on it and it cracks a little bit. I'm like, oh, that's nice. But it's hey, everybody has funny things that they find fascinating. Well, that's mine.
Well, you know, it's also the time for frost flowers, where the moisture in the soil gets pushed out by the freeze-thaw process, and it forms these really intricate ice sculptures on the soil. So, you know, as you're going out and checking your soil for bare areas and spreading out those legume seeds, then it'd be great to look for those frost flowers too.
Yeah, but you got to have green plants though. So, you know, if it's not green, it's not frost flowering. Because the moisture comes from the plant itself, right?
No, it comes out of the soil. A frost flower is just
I gotcha.
water.
Okay.
That's frozen and into delicate. It's like a snowflake that forms in the soil, but bigger.
That's just wonderful. Okay. All right. So we do have 6 more weeks of winter. I don't know. You know, we're supposed to do research-based information.
Right? Hey, but you know, it's like Groundhog's Day is, you know, what is it? Half your feed and half your hay you should have by Groundhog's Day, I think it is. But anyway, what we're doing is we're starting to look at our rations and see how much hay we have in the barn and what hay we should be feeding to who, because I know some farmers are getting close to having some calves on the ground. And so we want to know what hay in the barn we need to feed to which of our animals.
Yeah, so we're basically transitioning from one furry mammal to the other. So we're going from groundhogs to beef cows.
Right. Yeah. And we're going to talk about, you know, how to make sure we are meeting the winter feed needs of those beef cattle.
That's right. And, you know, let's just talk cost for a minute, because I think it's just, we'll start with the value that you get for a forage analysis, right? Because it costs money to do it. And that can be a deterrent. But think of it this way. If you know the forage quality of your feed, you could potentially reduce, or if you don't know the forage quality of your feed, you could be reducing the weight of your calves and your cows. And if you, again, we talk about calving at the wrong time, and then the cow's going to lactate less, and it's going to compound into basically when you take your animals to the livestock auction barn or sell your animals wherever you do, they're going to weigh less, right? So it costs around $20, I would say, per sample to do a forage analysis. And that's a rough estimate, right? $20. So if you're talking about $2 a pound, I mean, that's only 10 pounds worth of loss. So if you're feeding the wrong hay, I guarantee you're probably in your herd, you're probably losing more than 10 pounds. And you could have avoided that with a $20 forage analysis.
Yeah.
it's just the value that you get from that $20 could really translate in terms of better management for better yields and a better bottom line at the end.
And depending on where you're located, there may be some cost share funding available to do forage analyses. So definitely reach out to your local cost share agency and see if there's some funding that'll help pay for those forage tests.
Yeah, so let's begin with dry hay, right?
Right.
So most people are feeding dry hay.
Well, I mean, let me start with saying that the bad part of doing a forage test is you get this stack of paper in the mail from all your hay bales or all the samples you sent in, and you get this huge list of numbers, and there's no interpretation. There's no this is your good range, your bad range. There's none of that on that sheet. So it's really frustrating to try to interpret this for a lot of farms. And so we're going to try today to help you get past that frustration, help you determine the quick, easy way to interpret your results, and give you a little bit more information based on the numbers you might be getting on your forage analysis.
Right, absolutely. And I guess let's talk about moisture. Moisture should be in your forage analysis. And depending on whether you're doing dry hay or you're doing silage or haylage, the moisture is obviously going to be different.
Right.
But for dry hay, so let's kind of focus on that. If your moisture level is above 10%, then what you have is a product that's potentially not completely stable, right? It still has a lot of moisture. It's not fully cured. So you're going to have some fluctuations in the nutrients. So the moisture level is a really important thing to look at for verification that the rest of the numbers are going to be pretty consistent and they're going to be stable.
Right. And so 10 is your magic number. You want to be under 10 on that percent moisture for dry hay.
Yeah. And a little bit over 10, you can kind of use your best judgment. But if it's 20, then, that bale is unstable. It's going to heat up. It's going to lose more dry matter. It's going to lose more crude protein. It's going to cause different effects that, that will kind of void the numbers that you're seeing in that forage analysis. So good to know, right?
Right. And where you're going to see the impact is the difference between your crude protein and your adjusted crude protein. The adjusted crude protein is going to take out the non digestible proteins, which have been damaged by heat typically. And so if your crude protein number and your adjusted crude protein number are close or equal, that says that your hay was harvested, stored, and baled well. And so that is typically going to be impacted by that percent moisture that's still in there. So all of those three things are going to play together. But if your crude protein and your adjusted crude protein are close to equal, then you did good.
That's right. That's right. So that's another number you can look at. When you're having that heating, a lot of times you can actually cook some proteins and degrade them and cause these bonds between the different compounds and the hay and the proteins to make it inaccessible,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that adjusted crude protein does allow you to look and see what's there. So if you got the crude protein and adjusted crude protein number relatively close, you're good. So what numbers are considered excellent to pour when we're talking about grass hay, when we're talking about dry hay, and we're looking at protein? So, Karen, what would be like an excellent range for protein?
Well, it depends on your animal, right? So, well, I guess it doesn't, but
Well, no. I mean, I see where you're going with it, but
you're
generally,
gonna
when we're
want
talking about
something
something,
over 12, right?
yeah. So, we're kind of, we're always talking about fact sheets and extension resources, and for today's show, we're kind of looking off one from Wisconsin. It's a hay analysis guide for beef cattle determining winter feed needs, and it's by Amy Radins from University of Wisconsin. So it's just a nice sheet to look off of. So that's kind of what we're basing some of our numbers on today. Whether it's WVU, Ohio State, or Wisconsin in this case. It's all good quality information.
And this was actually a cooperative document. And, extension is cooperative across state lines, across the country. And this was, Wisconsin published it, but it was also a Iowa County extension agent helped Gene Schriefer. So Amy Radens and Gene Schriefer all both worked together to create this really awesome fact sheet that we will tag in the podcast and give you a link to it, because it's really helpful in figuring out what is good hay and what you need to be feeding to who on your farm.
That's right.
But yeah, so your protein percent for excellent forage quality, you're looking at 14.
Right, 14%. So that's for excellent. So chances are you're probably getting a pretty good legume percentage into your mixed hay when you're baling your samples here. So 14% for excellent. Good, they're saying, is about 13%, medium 8%, and then poor is 4%. Most people are going to fall in that 8 to 13, probably 8 to 12 is what I would say qualifies for our average, good, and medium. Poor is when you get to 4% when we're talking about those moisture levels. So as it cures, then it rains, then it has to dry longer.
Yeah, and a lot of that's connected to how soon you get to harvest it. Like, is it in the boot stage, or is it maybe starting to go to seed? All that kind of time that allows additional lignin to form in the grasses that's not really palatable or digestible for the animals.
And honestly, even properly harvested mature hay, mature grasses aren't going to give you 4. You're going to basically cut it. It's going to start curing. It's probably going to get rained on. So, when that happens several times and it takes forever to get it off the field, it starts degrading and you can get numbers that are very low. If you're buying hay, you don't always know. So that's why it's good to do the forage analysis. If you're baling your own hay, it's good to know as well. But I think you have a better grasp of what you have as far as what's going to be good versus poor. So 14 excellent, 13 good when you're looking at the percentage that you're feeding. 8 medium is going to be around 8, and anything below 8 is probably going to be poor quality.
And that's for the protein percentages.
And one thing you have to understand too is the lower the quality of the hay, the less your animal's going to eat. And that's one of the things that they reference here is, if you're looking at good to excellent hay, chances are a dry cow is going to eat 2.5% of its weight to 2.7% of its weight, and a lactating cow is going to eat a little bit more. And they're saying that it'll eat 2.7% of its weight to 3% for that good, excellent range, which is really important to know, because once you start to get to the medium and the poor and you're right at that threshold, if you calculate based on a 2.5 to 3% intake, then chances are you're lowballing your numbers, because that cow's going to eat less of poor quality hay. It fills too much. And then it takes longer to break down. There's less room in there. It requires more water. It takes more energy to break down, and there's less energy in there. So when you're talking about medium quality, you're probably looking at a 2% intake for that animal. And if you're going below medium, so below that 8% range for crude protein, if that's the number we're looking at, you're looking at less than 2% of the animal weight's intake. So it's a double-edged sword, right? So not only is it eating poor hay, it's eating less of poor hay, and it really needs more nutrients, but it just can't fit in there.
Right. And so if you're looking at your forage test, and you can look at the ADF and or ANDF, or the acid detergent fiber and the non-digestible fiber, right?
Right.
So you're looking at those numbers, and when you're looking at your acid deterrent fiber, that ADF number, you want it to be less than 40 is good, but over 45, you're looking at maybe impacting the amount that they're going to actually eat.
Yes, and so that's when we talk about TDN, total digestible nutrients, it's kind of a combination between the energy and the protein available. And then it's going to be the reciprocal of the acid detergent fiber or the non-digestible nutrients, right? So, when an animal's intaking forages, the stuff that's going to be able to break down is the total digestible nutrients. The stuff that it's not going to be able to break down is going to be fiber.
Right.
So those numbers typically go to 100. And so as the total digestible nutrients goes down, the fiber or the acid detergent fiber goes up. And so there is that relationship, for what the animal's eating. Even though a cow can break down cellulose, it can't really break down lignin. That's why you don't see cows eating wood. Well, but it's you got to think about it, right? Because we say cellulose for humans is fiber, but cellulose for a ruminant animal like a cow is nutrients because they can break that down. But once you get lignin on cellulose, it binds it, and termites can get through it, but cows cannot. Right. And that's where those numbers start skewing. So when you have, if we're looking at this chart here, excellent quality hay is going to have a TDN of 62% or higher. Good is going to be at 58. Medium is going to be right at 50%. So, if you're looking at your chart there and your TDN is 50%, you're in the medium range. And that is when you start to see an effects of both intake and nutrient quality. So if you're doing medium hay, don't expect your animals to be gaining a whole lot of weight, if any, probably losing weight in the wintertime, especially if it's a wet winter. And we've talked about those new energy requirements going up when the animal's wet.
Right. So just to review, your TDN, your total digestible nutrients, is a measure of the energy available for the animals. And like Dan was saying, in the wintertime when it's cold, you do need to increase the amount of energy available. So it's a great time to know how much energy is in your hay so you can make adjustments to purchasing extra feedstocks that have a higher energy content to supplement a hay that has a lower TDN.
Yeah, exactly. So when you do that, and just because you have medium to poor quality hay doesn't mean that you can't use it. You could feed certain animals with it. You can supplement it with supplemental feed. We talk about grains, we talk about soybean meals, things like that. You can actually figure out what you're deficient in, what your goal is, what animals you have, and piece together a balanced ration. So that if your goal is to maintain a weight, you can maintain a weight. If your goal is to put weight on that animal because you want to turn around and sell that animal soon, no matter what time of year it is, you're able to do that. And obviously, weather and moisture is a major factor in determining how much energy is required for that animal to either maintain its weight, lose weight, or gain weight. So you can adjust all this by knowing what the numbers are and being able to balance a good ration so that you're not surprised when you take your animal to get sold and all of a sudden you're looking at the animals getting loaded and the body condition is just not what you wanted. So when they go to get sold, it really, it could be a very bad day for you. And it could be something that you could have potentially prevented by doing a forage analysis and knowing what quality you're giving those animals so that you could better prepare for that day when they're getting sold.
Yes. And so when you're doing your feed ration, you want to use the dry matter or the DM column of your soil test or sorry, of your forage test. The as fed column tells you the moisture content basically. And so if you have a silage, it's going to be a much higher, they're going to have to eat more weight to get to the nutrients or to get that quantity in. So that's the as fed and it has the moisture in it. The dry matter is where you're going to be calculating and comparing forages using your dry matter. So that's what you use for your nutrient rationing. But you do have to understand what your animals can eat based on the digestible nutrients and the amount of lignin that is in that particular hay.
That's right. And one of the things you said is using dry matter to compare different feedstuffs. Yeah, you can. So knowing what the dry matter numbers are, you can compare dry hay to haylage and look and see, which one is higher protein. Because the animal can eat things that have high moisture in it, and that doesn't affect the total dry matter that's in their gut. So you're going to see, in terms of volume, the animal's eating a lot more volume of haylage with the high moisture, because a lot of that's water, than dry hay. But when you're trying to compare, when you're making sure that you have those ranges that we talked about for quality, you can actually compare the dry hay to the silage or the haylage using that dry matter number, because obviously that what they're doing is they're taking the water weight apart, and you're getting an accurate measure of nutrients based on the mass that's there, not the water.
Mm-hmm.
But when an animal's eating dry hay, they're going to also need more water than when an animal's eating haylage, because the moisture is already there. It's just like fresh grass to dry grass. You're going to find the animal drinking more water in the winter, and it's more important because it's less available in their feed. So, we talked about the importance of water. Having good water will make sure that the animal is intaking food. Because, when the animal can't drink enough to accommodate how much feed it's intaking, it'll just stop eating. Because what happens is, if you eat and don't have enough water, you start losing water, and losing water is worse than not eating.
Yeah.
So it's instinctual for an animal not to stop eating if there's not enough water. So first off, make sure there's enough water.
Clean water.
And clean water, yes, exactly. Because then you'll start, there's only so much room in the ruminants, in the ruminant gut of a cow in this case. And if it starts getting filled up with soil and ash and undigestible nutrients, and the hardness of the water, that minerals and things like that can start accumulating, and it just takes up space. It doesn't have any nutritional value. And honestly, as far as the health of the flora in the rumen, it's not good for it, because it has all these minerals that can inhibit the function of these bugs to break down the hay and the different feeds that you're giving that animal. So clean water, essential to good nutrient intake.
Yeah, and he mentioned ash and soil, right? So Dan was talking about, getting soil or ash. Well, on your forage test analysis, there is a column or a row for ash, right? And so the ash content basically will tell you if any soil got onto the hay. And so soil can get onto the hay a couple different ways. So for instance, if you got a new baler or a new tedder or something, and maybe you cut too low, you can get soil onto your hay because it gets pulled up out of the ground as you're caring for the grasses and trying to get them to dry and baled. You can also get soil on hay through flooding. And so if it was down by the creek and floodwaters came up, or the creek came over the banks, a lot of times it'll bring that sediment up out of the creek and put it on the hay. So that is a really important thing to look at. It could also be from heavy rain splashing. So you've got your hay piled up and there's a little bit of mud around the base of it. That rain can splash up and put that soil up onto your hay. That's going to increase the ash content of your hay and make it less palatable, less digestible, and will make them just not want to eat it, right? Because cattle don't like to eat dirty hay. They don't want to eat dusty hay. Like if you're on a dirt road and there's a lot of trucks driving by and that dust kicks up over the air and lands on your hay, again, you're going to get a higher ash content. So when you're looking, and so let's say you're buying some hay, you look at that ash content. If it is over 9%, that should be a red flag for you. So you really want to investigate that ash content. Why is it so high? And maybe not bring that one home with you. If your ash content for your hay is high, you need to start looking at how you're doing your harvesting, where you're storing it, and how you can start to decrease that contaminant on your hay.
Exactly. And don't ignore like that number, what Karen was saying was the cause of that ash content. If you're cutting too low, let's not forget the basics. And in terms of regrowth, it takes much longer for the plant to regrow when you're cutting too low.
Oh yeah.
So that big stack of bales in your barn or wherever it is could be bigger if you were cutting higher. So think about all this.
And it seems counterintuitive, right? You're leaving that out in the field, but that plant needs that extra little bit of sunlight and growth time to get those roots stronger so that it can grow back faster and more the next year.
Yeah, let's remember that growth is exponential. So exponential means that it just keeps doubling, right? So if it starts doubling at a very low number, I mean, even though it's doubling, it's almost a flatline curve until a certain point.
Right.
Well, you want to make sure you're at that exponent, like that really good number where when you start doubling 100 instead of 1, you can see how much faster it will grow in terms of biomass. So that's the idea. Like it's always going to grow exponentially, but you want to keep that exponential growth higher so that you're gaining more in a shorter amount of time.
It's critical, taking care of things. It's just like, if you can fix a problem in the beginning, it doesn't get to blow up, right? And so those little things that you do in the beginning really make an impact on the long-term health and sustainability of pretty much everything. So take care of it from the beginning, do it right the first time, and don't stress your grasses. Take care of your grass and your grass will take care of you. All cattle farmers are grass farmers. And if you aren't a grass farmer, then you're either on a feedlot or you're doing it wrong.
Yeah. Or what if you're an alfalfa farmer?
Well, and alfalfa is a little bit different, right? So even from ash content's perspective, alfalfa, you're going to have a higher ash content than you would for a grass, but it's still going to be below 9.
Yeah. And legumes are going to be higher in protein and TDN and all that stuff that we talked about. So just a quick recap, good protein levels when you're looking at a forage analysis, 13%. If you're getting below 8%, it's starting to really be lower quality. For TDN, total digestible nutrients, you want about 58. Once you get below 50%, you're looking at lower quality hay. And low quality hay isn't trash hay.
Right.
You just need to supplement or at least put it in the right place.
Right. Or feed it to an animal that doesn't have high nutrient needs. Stick it to your lower quality animals, or not your lower quality, but your lower nutrient need animals.
Yeah.
Your steers, your bull, things like that.
Exactly.
Thanks for listening to Extension Calling. This show is a collaboration between OSU Belmont County Extension Educator Dan Lima and WVU Ohio County Extension Agent Karen Cox. If you'd like a transcript of this show, contact us at the office. Also, let us know if you enjoy the show by ranking us on your podcast app.